Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
So today we're digging into a whole stack of sources you've shared with us. We're looking at the ancient Chera dynasty in Kerala, the legendary port of Muziris.
And all that fascinating archaeology that's come out recently. Pattanam, Kodungallur.
Exactly. So our mission basically is to unpack what these sources actually tell us about that whole era.
Yeah, it's global reach, which is kind of surprising, and this ongoing hunt for where Muziris really was.
Okay, let's set the scene first. The Cheras,
Right.
a major dynasty. Ancient South India, we're talking, Sangam age, maybe 4th or 3rd century BCE up to the 5th CE.
And then later the Kulasekaras, maybe 8th, 9th century up to the 12th. So a long history there.
And their territory was prime real estate.
Oh, yeah. The Kerala coast, bits of inland Tamil Nadu, control over trade routes, good farmland, very important.
And their capitals moved around a bit.
They did, yeah. Early on, sometimes inland like Karur, sometimes coastal like Muchiri or Muziris.
No.
Then later Mahadayapuram, which is, modern Kodungallur.
So these guys were deeply plugged into trade, especially sea trade.
Absolutely. Maritime trade was central. Pepper, obviously the famous black gold, but also agriculture. And they needed, a strong navy to protect those ships.
Makes sense. And lots of different people involved, right? Interacting.
Definitely. The sources suggest a really diverse society, especially later on, with influences from, all sorts of groups coming in through trade.
Which brings us right to Muziris, the legendary port.
Yeah, it pops up everywhere in ancient texts. Sangam poems describe it, ships arriving with gold.
It's changing it for local stuff.
Exactly. Goods from the interior.
And the Romans and Greeks knew it well. Pliny called it Primum Emporium India.
India's #1 trading spot, they say.
Yeah. And the Periplus text really details its role in that pepper trade.
And there's that incredible Muziris papyrus, a Greek document, 2nd century CE.
Right. It lists the cargo of just one Roman ship, worth millions.
Just shows the scale. And it even mentions specific trade laws. This was organized, serious business.
And not just business. The sources paint Muziris as this, melting pot.
Totally. Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, Chinese, Arabs, Jews.
Yeah.
People from all over.
And you see early evidence, or traditions at least, of different religions coexisting. Judaism, Christianity, later Islam.
And that DNA evidence from Pattanam showing Western Eurasian links, it kind of backs up that cosmopolitan picture.
So the big question, where was it? Which leads us to the archaeology.
Exactly. Pattanam. Near Kodungallur, excavations really kicked off there around 2004.
And what they've found is just, wow.
Isn't it? Just tons of foreign pottery, Roman amphorae, wine jars, fancy tableware.
Stuff from the Middle East, too.
Yeah, Iraqi glazed pottery, Mesopotamian jars, South Arabian stuff, and later Chinese porcelain. It's like a global marketplace in pieces.
And that Indian rouletteware, you said that was significant.
Huge. The biggest find of it anywhere in the Indian Ocean region. And crucially, some of it's in layers before the big Roman trade boom.
So trade networks were already buzzing before the Romans got heavily involved.
Oh, seems like it. Strong Indian Ocean connections already existed.
And it wasn't just pottery, right? Coins, beads.
Yep. Chera coins, Roman coins, tons of beads, glass, stone, evidence they were making them right there. Metal objects too, iron, copper, gold.
And those weird cameo blanks,
Yeah.
unfinished gems.
Yeah, kind of curious. Maybe being exported for carving somewhere else? Who knows?
And actual structures, buildings.
Oh, yeah. Evidence of a pretty big wharf, brick and laterite, dated right to that peak trade period. 1st century BCE CE.
And the canoe.
The canoe, oldest boat found in India, carbon dated right there. Plus, brick buildings, wells. Looks like a proper town.
Okay, so Pattanam. The sheer amount of stuff, the right dates, the port evidence, it makes a really strong case.
It does. It points very strongly towards Pattanam being Muziris, or, a key part of that whole port complex. Romola Thapar called it a watershed find.
Right. But there is another view, centered on Kodungallur.
There is. Some historians, like MGS Narayanan, argue Kodungallur is Muziris. They point to later texts, like those Jewish copper plates from around 1000 CE.
What do they say?
They mention Kodungallur using a name, Mudrakode, which they argue is basically Muziris.
Okay. But the archaeology there.
Well, that's the tricky part. The digs in Kodungallur, like at Chairman Parambu, they tend to find stuff mostly from that later Chera period, 10th to 12th centuries CE.
So like Chinese celadon pottery from that era.
Exactly. Which is different chronologically from the peak Roman trade period we see so strongly at Pattanam.
So the timelines don't quite match up for Kodungallur being the Muziris of Pliny and the Periplus.
That seems to be the crux of the debate, yeah. Pattenham's evidence fits that earlier peak period much better. Kudungalur is definitely important, especially later, but maybe not the same Muziris described in those early texts.
Interesting. The whole Muziris Heritage Project covers the wider area, though, right?
It does, yeah. It acknowledges the whole region is historically significant, layered.
So, wrapping this deep dive up,
Uh,
what have we seen?
well, a powerful ancient dynasty, the Cheras, a truly legendary port city, Muziris, connecting India globally.
Driven by valuable stuff like pepper. And now, compelling physical clues, mainly a Pattanam, that seem to bring that legend alive.
Yeah, it really challenges you to see ancient India not as some isolated place, but as a really key dynamic player in a connected world. Trade, culture, everything moving.
And the debate about the exact spot just shows how history gets rewritten or refined as we find new things.
Absolutely.
So here's something to maybe chew on. Think about how those ancient sea lanes carried more than just cargo.
Ideas, technologies, people.
Right. All flowing back and forth, laying foundations for the kind of, unique multicultural societies you find in places like Kerala even today.